Hey there, listeners. Thanks for stopping by to the podcast today. Please, before you're done listening to this episode, leave us a review. If you're on Spotify, you can review now, and you can also review on Apple Podcasts. But if there's any platforms that I'm forgetting about and you can leave us a review, please do so. If you're happening to watch this on YouTube, and if you don't know, you can watch these podcasts on YouTube now, please like and subscribe to the channel and share the episode as well. So thanks for stopping by, everybody, and enjoy the episode.
Knowledge is Power is where you come to hear people's life experiences to learn from. So, without further ado, let's roll the intro.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I have a dream. Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Hello and welcome back to the Knowledge is Power podcast. This is your host, Max Willett, and we got another great guest on today and a fellow Rhode Islander. So if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hey, Max, thanks for having me. Hey, everyone, I'm Jason Allard. I am a video producer, filmmaker, urban explorer, general history fan, born and raised here in Rhode Island. I've been working on a web series on my YouTube channel that covers interesting, abandoned, historic places throughout Rhode Island and New England, and I show you why they deserve our respect and attention. The series is called Abandoned from Above, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. So when Max reached out to me, really appreciate it. So thank you again, Max.
Yeah, no problem. And it's great to have, like I said, a fellow Rhode Islander on. The only other content creator I've had on from Rhode Island is Bill Bartholomew. And he's been on the podcast a couple of times, and we're hoping to get him on again to talk about some real estate, because he tweeted something, or I don't know, posted now, I guess it's called, seeing they changed the name of Twitter, but he posted something a little controversial in the real estate industry. So for those of you listening to this episode, you get a little sneak peek of that upcoming recording. But yeah, I got introduced to Jason through his YouTube channel, and I found a lot of his videos really enticing and interesting, because a lot of his videos I didn't even know about, about these abandoned places in Rhode Island and all this history that existed, and it was incredible. So I think a really great starting point, Jason, would be for you to tell us your life story of how you got to this particular point, and then we can get into sort of why you started making these videos.
Sure, yeah. So I was born and raised in Rhode Island. Grew up in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, aka the greatest city in the world. For anyone outside of Rhode Island, I think I have to give some background, right? So the state of Rhode Island, obviously smallest in the United States, and it's like a dysfunctional family. So all of the towns, all of the cities, they're all like, we all tolerate each other, but we all have all these inside jokes, and we'll just bully each other relentlessly, right? So 100 years ago, Woonsocket was this powerhouse in manufacturing. Then over the years it declined, and now it's like almost a shell of what it was. Born and raised in Rhode Island, so Woonsocket is where it started. And I got into video production at a young age. My parents bought me my first camera when I was 12 years old. It was this old Sony Handycam, and it used 8mm tapes. It was Super 8, and I didn't have any editing software, so I would just have to edit everything within the camera itself. And I first started out making videos about Lord of the Rings, kind of like recreating all of the battle scenes with my cousins. We're like really goofy about it. There's no direction. I still have those videos. They're absolutely terrible, but they're fun to look back on. So, everything kind of started there, and it was going throughout the streets of Woonsocket. We had all of these old mill buildings. We would take our bikes out and we'd go shoot videos all over the place. And it was just an interesting place to grow up because there was so much going on. Like I said, people say Woonsocket is, it's not like a desirable place to go because there are some interesting characters walking around, but it made for fun adventures with my friends. So, every time we'd make a video, we'd have a new spot to go to, different backdrops, and it made it a lot of fun, really. So it kind of evolved. Like in middle school, we were making these videos, and Woonsocket Middle School, that's where I went, is it's a pretty interesting place because it's the biggest middle school on the East Coast of the United States. And that's where I started, really editing my videos. That's where I was introduced to video editing. We had, video class there after school. So I was able to combine, everything that I was doing with my friends to everything that was going on in the city, and then combine that into what we were doing after school. And interestingly, years later, that middle school ended up being abandoned and ended up being the largest abandoned school on the East Coast. So to have, my beginning in video production start in Woonsocket, and especially kind of blossom at Woonsocket Middle School, and then for that to become the biggest abandoned school and then tie it all back together, when I grew up and continued into video production, it was like almost full circle to start there and then, put everything together right now for what I'm working on with my current series. Even full time right now, I work within video production. I manage a video production studio just outside of Boston for a market research company. So we handle all of the big tech clients working on emerging technologies. So really what I'm doing now with my YouTube channel is just a passion project. It's something I'm doing for fun on the side. And, I didn't even go to school for video production. I actually went to school for psychology with a focus on early childhood education. So I went to the University of Rhode Island, and it was there that I continued doing video production, but it was just on the side, and I was focusing on my studies for psychology. But then once I graduated, I saw, there are a lot of good opportunities to reach a lot of people through video. And then I just continued down that path, and I'm lucky enough that it's my full-time job and I'm able to pursue it on the side as my passion too.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty good story. And yeah, so do you remember, when you uploaded your first video to YouTube and sort of what inspired that video?
Yeah, the first videos that I uploaded to YouTube were back in high school. It was back when YouTube first started. This was in like 2006, I want to say. And it was just music videos. So we would just lip sync to music videos. I think that was like the big thing on the platform at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a completely different landscape, right? Clickbait didn't really exist. The concept of going viral didn't really exist. So we were just doing it for fun.
Right.
And I was still learning video editing. I had no idea what I was doing. And it was just a way to be creative and to be goofy. And then once we realized like there's a better way to tell stories and we can reach a lot of people, that's when it kind of, started to expand. We started to do like comedy skits. And by the way, all of these videos that we made are still on YouTube. They're on a separate channel. I think if you search my name, you can still like go digging through and find all these music videos, which is pretty interesting, completely different than what's on my main channel right now.
Yeah. Can you sort of relate or see a growth in your basically way you edit your videos and film your videos from how it started to now? Is there sort of like, can you see a gradual growth and improvement, you think? Honestly, I can see it, but
yeah, I think if you're not looking back on what you were creating 10 years ago and cringing, then you've kind of stagnated. So I look back at what I was creating even 2 months ago, and I look back and I think, well, I could have changed this, I could have changed that. So there's definitely a growth. I think, I'm not, every time I make a video, I'm not trying to get more views than the last or more engagement than the last. I'm just trying to create a better video than the last one that I made. So I'm my own competition. That's how I view it whenever I create a video, is I'm just trying to challenge myself and then push where I'm at creatively. So the videos I was making 2 years ago are not the videos that I'm making now, and it's not the same that I'm going to make in 2 years. Because originally with my channel that I have now with Abandoned from Above, it started out with simple drone videos with text overlays. It didn't even have my voice. It didn't have, historic photos or cutaways, references, things like that. Those were about 2 minutes long. And then I evolved into what I'm doing now, which is longer form content, 10 to 15 minute mini documentaries going really in depth about these abandoned places or urban legends. So I don't know, the storytelling has to evolve as your skills evolve, and they kind of go hand in hand. And that's what I've been trying to do. So I'm not even sure what the next project's going to be, but I already know I'm just going to try to push it with what I'm doing on the editing side and the filmmaking side. And we're lucky enough now that technology is advancing so quick, whether it's drone technology, editing software, camera gear, that there are so many options. You can get so creative with it. So yeah, to answer your question, I can definitely see a difference in my style and my editing over the course of the past several projects.
Yeah. And something that I think is an issue, and I want to say the whole entertainment industry, because this is still, I think, obviously considered entertainment, is a lot of things aren't original anymore. They're remakes, they're copycats and whatnot. And that's been something that has been a real issue, I think, of recent in entertainment, especially movies. And to come out with content that's engaging, to come out with content that's informative, educational, is extremely important. And that's sort of what I think your value proposition is because we live in a world of these unoriginal, clout seeking copycats on social media platforms who think they're all that, and really they just picked up their phone and created clickbaity things that really take no talent, So to come in here and create this content, like I said, that's educational, is a real value proposition, because believe it or not, I don't think there's as many people doing this anymore because they think, oh, it's going to be easy. But when you start as well as you did on this channel and are evolving into what you are now, and it sort of, I think, combines that modern aspect you see in a lot of the better YouTube channels, the combination of those historical images and those sort of like pop-ups and everything. And then you have sort of the comedy aspect where you have your talking head, you know what I mean, in the videos and whatnot. And it sort of combines all those aspects into something that catches your eye and makes you want to keep watching. Right. And that's something that I noticed throughout your more recent videos, is those, especially those different types of aspects. And that takes a lot of creativity and a lot of editing on the back end, which a lot of people don't have, so
yeah.
I just wanted to say that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you create too. There's a lot of time that goes into it. It's not just like throwing something together and then uploading it, but going back to the process and the style of videos that I'm making now, like you said, where I'm blending the historical images with like animations and dumb jokes and drone footage, I started to realize that if I want to see good content, or if I want to make good content, it has to be what I would want to watch or what would entertain me. Because if I'm not entertained while I'm making it or editing it, then I'm not having fun. And then like, why would you enjoy watching it? And especially within the urban exploration and abandoned space on YouTube. And for those of you unfamiliar, urban exploration is the exploration of man-made structures, typically abandoned in the natural environment. So it's like abandoned buildings. There are different subsections of urban exploration, like rooftopping, where people will just try to climb to the tallest building they can find, get the crazy view, get the shot, and then climb back down. But what I was seeing in this space on YouTube is there was two sides, right? So on one side was essentially PowerPoint slideshows. They would just show still images. This is what it used to look like. This is what it looks like now. This is what might happen to it, which was like very informational, but not entertaining at all. And then on the other side was almost like the clickbait side, where they would hype up, oh my God, there's this abandoned amusement park. We found a killer clown covered in blood. It was like completely ridiculous. And they would run around with their GoPro and it would be point of view, which was entertaining on its own. And I would watch both parts of those. Like I'm not knocking them. I would enjoy all of those videos, but there was no middle ground where someone was just putting them all together and telling me everything that I need to know in like 15 minutes about one of these abandoned places. So I wanted the mix of the exploration, the historical significance, and then the storytelling side of it, and then what's going to happen to it. So that's where I started really to put these videos together, is to tell an entertaining story, get all the facts right, and then you could leave the video with an appreciation for what it was, and hopefully you had a good time watching it at the same time. Because like I'll be editing these videos, I'll think of like the dumbest thing for an animation, for me like popping up and begging Antonio's Pizza for a sponsorship, and which they still haven't sponsored me. So Antonio's, if you're listening, please send me some free pizza. but to do that, to just make it as fun as possible, because it shouldn't be like a boring documentary. You shouldn't be bored with facts the whole time, but you shouldn't be like, having all these crazy point of view shots shoved down your throat throughout the whole video with people like screaming into the camera. So that's where I found the middle ground. Is I'm just making the videos that I would want to see on these subjects, and then that makes it easier for me to piece it all together, because I'm just entertaining myself while I'm editing it.
Right. Yeah. And that's something that I'm definitely guilty of. I think the first video, I mean, I am not great at editing. I wouldn't say I despise it, but I definitely don't look forward to it. So that's why a lot of my videos are literally just maybe me sitting here talking through my webcam or on my phone, and not really putting in all this great animation work that's in your videos. Cause a lot of my videos are more like informational about 3D printing or like the stock market, and me trying to create an animation is like going into Google Slides and creating like a track and like having that object move on the track when like that's the extent of my animation, skill level. But I remember I 3D printed a disc golf disc, right? And I wanted to make a video, go out and test the disc with somebody who's good at disc golf, because I'm not that great at it. And I remember in the beginning of the video, I was creating like a highlight reel with like some competitive music going on. And it was like, boom, 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 with all these great shots being and everything. And I remember watching it over and over again. I said, man, that looks great.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, I watched it after I posted it and I'm like, oh man, I put like the same highlight in there 3 times.
It's a process. It's a process.
I'm like, whoops. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like, definitely from that standpoint of editing something and watching it and entertaining yourself, that's extremely important, because if you don't like it, then you don't really know who else is going to like it.
Yeah. Plus, I got to watch these videos like 100 times while I'm editing,
Yeah.
like the filming takes, I'll go out for a day, get all the shots I need, and then I'm sitting down, and it's a very solitary exercise, sitting down and editing for hours and hours and hours. And there are times where I'll edit something for 4 hours straight. I'll cut 15 seconds of video because I'm like tweaking things, and then I'm like, no, that doesn't fit, or that joke is terrible. I'll play it back for my wife or something. She'll be like, no, that's cringe. You need to take that out. So it's just, but the funnest part for me is the editing, seeing it all come together. Because I usually describe it as a puzzle that you're putting together from the outside in, and like I know what the puzzle looks like. I just have to put the whole thing together, and I know all the different pieces.
Right.
So yeah, but to your point, yeah, it's like it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, and if you look at it, and I definitely looked at it from the outside in at one point. I remember I, shamelessly watched a lot of YouTube, and there was this YouTuber called Vehicle Virgins, and it was a car YouTube channel, and the guy who ran it was like just some rich kid, right? And never really had it difficult. Not that I have it difficult whatsoever. I have a great life. But he went on there complaining about how difficult it is to edit videos, and how difficult, he makes all this money, but he works, 12-hour days. And and that put like a really bad taste in my mouth for content creators, especially, for somebody like him who was basically successful within a year of uploading YouTube videos, and mom and dad bought him a house to begin with, and whatnot. And, so I think that's where my disdain of video editing comes from, is like watching that guy and being a fan, and then him releasing that video and me being like, dude, why are you complaining about what you have? Like, sure, video editing's not easy. It's not something that, I look forward to, but some people do enjoy it. But it's not like you're out cutting logs all day in the middle of the woods and, throwing them in the back of a truck. You know what I mean? So like, for somebody to say something like that and not really appreciate what they're doing, is where definitely that comes from. But yeah, so all right, we're going to get back to you. So let's get to, would you say that sort of like the video that puts you on the map was the video about your abandoned school in Woonsocket?
Yeah, that was the one that really grew my passion for urban exploration and checking out abandoned places. So my best friend Scott and I were filming a different video at the time. This was in 2012. We were working on a documentary about cars, and we wanted to get a really cool backdrop. So we visited the Woonsocket Middle School, which had been abandoned for 3 years at this point. It wasn't really on my radar. I had been interested in abandoned places and exploring some while I was in college at URI, um, but it wasn't on the level that it is now, and I didn't have this like urge to go inside them and document them from top to bottom and reach out to people and get all the facts straight. So we went to Woonsocket Middle School to use as a backdrop for the documentary. And I said, you know what, Scott, let me just climb up one of the fire escapes. I'll peek in one of the windows and see what's up. And I climbed up, I look in, and it was exactly the way it was left on the last day of school. All the desks were still there, writing on the blackboards, books were still open on the desks. And then I turned to look at them and was like, we gotta shelve this current documentary, and we gotta do something about the Woonsocket Middle School, because it was a school that I attended from grades 6 through 8. It was a school that he attended. And he was older than me. He attended it in the late 60s and early 70s. And we looked at each other like, there's a story here, we got to tell it. And then we ended up going back, reaching out to alumni from as far back as the class of 1940, interviewed them. We got granted access from the city to access the school, which is on complete lockdown, by the way. This place is like the Fort Knox of abandoned places. It's ridiculous. There's 3 separate alarm systems. I tripped one by accident while we were filming in there, and the police were there within 5 minutes. It was insane.
Yeah.
But to document that, to go in there and explore it, it really, hit a chord with me that there are so many other places like this. If my middle school was abandoned, how many other places are out there that meant so much to so many different people? And we ended up creating the documentary called My Old School. It premiered on Rhode Island PBS in 2014. Scott and I were on air to discuss it as part of the annual fundraiser, and it was very well received, and it was so much fun to make, and it just showed the importance of preservation, awareness, and telling these stories. And I guess, yeah, in a way, that was the one that kind of put me on the map as far as Rhode Island goes. I think, people were more aware of my work at that time, but it wasn't for another 4 years that I started my series. It takes time. These things, it's not like you can just come up with a concept and say, okay, I'm making a YouTube channel about this, and that's what I'm going to do for the next 5 years. And I'm going to make like it's not mapped out. It should be very organic. Anytime you're doing something creatively, if you have the end goal of like, I'm making a successful YouTube channel, I'm going to make this many videos and get this many views, it's not going to work. You're already starting out for the wrong reasons. But it all started, it started with My Old School. And very recently, as part of the 10-year anniversary of that documentary coming out, we revisited the school. 10 years later, it's still abandoned. We were granted access again, but fortunately, it's being redeveloped right now into housing and apartments and community rec center. So it's come full circle. That it was what started my passion and my interest in abandoned places, and really jump-started my extreme focus on filmmaking. And then to go back there in the last few months was incredible, because it's still stuck in time. It's still there. We visited it before any redevelopment started, but it's been a process.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say the eeriest thing about the school was? Because you went there initially, so it wasn't too far after it was abandoned, but then 10 years later, when you go there again, what did you think was like the eeriest thing about the school?
So anytime I have an abandoned shoot scheduled, because we plan these out, I'll do all the research well ahead of time, so I know exactly what we're walking into. This one was different because I didn't know how much had changed. It was one of the rare cases where I had already been there and seen it in an abandoned state, but to know that 10 years later it was still in that state, I couldn't sleep the night before. I was so excited and so anxious to see what had changed in there. So to go back in, it still smelled the same. There was writing that me and my crew had written on the blackboards that was still there, dated 2013 when we explored there. The computer lab where I learned how to edit videos was still set up. The Mac computers and the iMovie discs were still on the desks. I'd say the eeriest thing about walking in there was seeing the advanced decay that had changed. So for example, the first time we went in 2013, all of the floors were warped in the gyms. So it looked like a skate park because they were just completely buckled. So I was curious, like, okay, how are they going to look 10 years later? And then we go back into the gyms, and now it looks like, an even more extreme skate park. The waves are, instead of 1 foot high, the hardwood floor is buckled 3 feet high in places. The walls have now collapsed. The plaster has completely fallen down from the ceiling, and the net has rotted off of the basketball hoops. So it's very rare. This place is what we would refer to as a grail in the Urbex community, where it's completely untouched by vandals. It hasn't been redeveloped, hasn't been touched by arsonists. It's just clean as the way it is, as the way it was left on the last day it was in operation. One of the things that we explored in the school that we didn't while we were making the original documentary was the tunnels underneath the school that would link up the different sections. That was probably the eeriest part. They were lined with asbestos. Probably not the best idea to go down there and explore it, but when you're down there and you're checking it out and you just see a black tunnel, it's like, okay, I got to go down there. I got to go check that out. Like, I can't help it. So
you needed the killer clown.
I wouldn't even be shocked if there was one down there. I would give that clown credit for chilling down there for that long.
I think the killer clown in Woonsocket would be a crackhead. So
yeah, see, you can make that joke because you're from Rhode Island.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I am from Charlestown, so a lot of people don't even count it, I guess, as Rhode Island because we're not as cultured as the Northerners in the state. I guess you don't have many, great pizza places and whatnot. We're just a beach community, and there's a lot of New Yorkers that come. So
yeah.
It's not like Woonsocket and Providence and Johnson and Cranston and all those cities up there, Charlestown,
Woonsocket, the Paris of New England.
I guess that's how you could put it. Yeah. I've never been to Paris, so
I should put a disclaimer. I'm actually here on behalf of the Woonsocket Tourism Council. So I will be promoting everything about Woonsocket. Everyone go visit Woonsocket.
Okay. Well, yeah. I apologize for saying that because I didn't know that was the case. So yeah, I was actually in Woonsocket. It had to have been a couple of months ago. I think it was the beginning of the summer. And I was looking at a property that had been abandoned actually for 7 years. It was a house that we were going to look at to possibly invest and flip. And that was the first time I had been in Woonsocket in a long time. Probably since I played baseball a lot. So probably since I played baseball was the last time I was in Woonsocket, not up there all that often. But I am all over the state, believe it or not. Go to Burrillville quite recently a lot, and been up and down the state. A lot of people don't know about Burrillville, but that's sort of like, that's the real sticks of Rhode Island,
Definitely.
It's about, a whole 20 minutes from the highway,
Yeah, they do have Spring Lake though. I give them credit. Burrillville has Spring Lake, which is beautiful.
It is. Well, it sort of borders, Western Mass and Eastern Connecticut, and there's a lot of woods up there, and it's a beautiful area. A lot of people don't know Burrillville, but there's some great hiking trails up there as well. But actually, are there any hiking trails or parks in Woonsocket that you can plug?
Oh yeah, we got the bike path. I live in Providence now,
okay.
So I moved out of Woonsocket, but I can still plug Woonsocket a little bit. Yeah, we have the Blackstone Valley bike path, absolutely gorgeous. Highly recommend if you're in the mood for a stroll.
Very cool. Yeah.
You just got to watch out. So one of the, the more charming aspects of Woonsocket is that there's a water treatment facility, and, normally they're enclosed and it's airtight. So the smell of the sewage doesn't leave the facility, but in Woonsocket, they do it a little bit differently, and it actually leaves the facility. It's an open air water treatment plant. So if you visit the bike path on the wrong day, there will be a strong smell in the air, but the views are still gorgeous, so I still recommend you visit. Thank you on behalf of the Woonsocket Tourism Council.
Well, I'll be making sure to send them an invoice for the sponsorship of this video, but
yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. So another one that I found very interesting, because since I am from Charlestown, you made a video about, you called it Wood River Junction, but part of it is in Charlestown, part of it's in Richmond, Hope Valley, or Hopkinton, I guess. So if you want to talk about, it is your most recent video on your YouTube channel. If you want to talk about that, that would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, most recent video, and it's been pretty popular too. Which I guess the timing with Oppenheimer coming out, maybe that it coincides with that a little bit. People are very interested in nuclear energy these days, and this
130,000 views. I'm just now seeing that.
It's an absolutely crazy story, and I had heard about it a little over a year ago. I think it's like someone messaged me about it, and I'm like, yeah, I'll look into it. But, if the land had been redeveloped, if there's just like a target there, then it's not as interesting. But to give everyone a quick overview, the Wood River Junction criticality accident was the U.S. nuclear industry's first and only fatality due to a nuclear accident. It happened in the United States, in Rhode Island, in a very secluded recovery plant in Charlestown. It's filed away as Wood River Junction, which is like right over the border. It could go either way. But it's a very interesting story because back in the 1960s, nuclear energy was on the rise, right? It was a viable energy source. So private companies were sinking a bunch of money into it. But part of the process was reprocessing spent fuel rods and nuclear waste. So this wasn't a nuclear power plant. It didn't have a nuclear reactor, but it was in the woods of Rhode Island. And what they would do is reclaim uranium from either radioactive waste or spent fuel rods and enrich the uranium, U-235. So there was a whole process for this. The best way to think of this facility is as a giant nuclear laundromat. So all of the dirty radioactive waste would go in, and at the end you'd get nice clean U-235 that could be then repurposed to create more fuel rods for your traditional nuclear power plants. What happened at this facility was in 1964, and the facility was only open for about 4 months, and because of some very sketchy safety regulations and a huge mix-up in the plant, what happened was Robert Peabody, a technician at the plant, ended up pouring a highly concentrated mixture of uranium into a vat, which condensed all of the uranium atoms together, causing a small nuclear excursion, or like almost a small explosion in the plant, and it completely covered him in radioactive liquids. He was exposed to record levels of radiation, over 10,000 rads, the equivalent of 700,000 chest x-rays at once across his entire body. And it's a very tragic story, really. He was a father of 9 children, lived in Charlestown. He was a Rhode Islander. He ran out of the plant. He went to the emergency building where he stripped off all of his clothes. He went through the normal emergency procedures. He was taken to Westerly Hospital, but they said, we don't have any treatment for radioactive exposure here. You have to go to Rhode Island Hospital. He got there. He was exposed to so much radiation, there was nothing they could do. They could just sit and wait. But his wedding ring turned into radioactive gold. The ambulance that he was taken to the hospital in had to be crushed and buried because it absorbed so much radiation from all of his effects that were on him. And he died 49 hours later from multi-organ failure due to acute radiation poisoning. The plant continued operating after an extreme cleanup and an investigation. They received, I believe, at least a dozen citations, but they were able to continue running. It was absolutely ridiculous that they had all these safety violations. It turned out that the water, the groundwater, the ground, everything in the area was contaminated with radioactive materials. And in 1980, eventually the plant closed and was abandoned and left in the woods of Rhode Island for about 16 years until its demolition in the 1990s. But today, the exact location of the plant is still there. You can still see the foundations laid out in the woods. It's now a nature preserve, the second largest in the state. And it's really beautiful now, but there are no signs of the history here, no signs of this significant event that happened. When you search for nuclear accidents around the world or criticality accidents, Chernobyl always shows up, Pripyat shows up, 3 Mile Island, the Demon Core, all of these very, crucial pieces of nuclear history show up. And then there was a footnote about Wood River Junction. So I dug into it. I realized that the site was still there. You could still go visit exactly where it happened. And I pieced everything together. So, it was wild to be able to tell this story. And it took months of research because I had to get everything right. I knew that there's a lot of history. I had to basically teach myself nuclear fission. In the video, I award myself an internet PhD in nuclear physics, because by that point I was like, you know what, I deserve this. I read enough about this place. But yeah, it is a tragic story that not many people know about, and for Rhode Island to have a piece of history and everything that happened in nuclear energy and in the tragedies and the significance of it is pretty wild. So I thought it was important to share that story and
Absolutely.
to at least bring to light what happened to Robert Peabody, because he was wronged in the whole situation. He was blamed by the company for what had happened. His family only received $22,000 after his wrongful death, and the whole thing was basically swept under the rug. So this was well before the internet, so it's not like word got out. And everything in my video I had to piece together from dozens of sources, different articles, scientific papers, newspaper articles across the board to tell the full story of what happened.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I knew it happened. I didn't know the details like your video went into. I didn't know the guy's name. I just knew it happened, and I knew it happened a long time ago. And I knew that it was the only really nuclear death in the United States. And I watched that video, and it was amazing. It captivated me, and a lot of great information in that. I mean, you're absolutely right about it being a tragic story. But something else, that's really interesting is nuclear energy has such a bad sort of status in terms of renewable energies, when really it has the least amount of deaths in the world in terms of renewable energies. Because you think about installing windmills, how huge they are and how awkward they are. And I'm not exactly sure of the death count of windmills, but it's definitely larger than one in the United States of America,
Yeah.
and it gets such a bad rap. But nuclear energy is definitely really interesting. I'm not going to sit here and tell you all this factual information I know, but my generalized opinion about nuclear energy is it's vastly misunderstood as this deadly technology. And I mean, in terms of renewable energies, I think it has a great potential. And I think a lot of people should do some more research on it and look into it. And in terms of renewables, it's way more efficient than solar and wind energy, and it's just kind of ugly, and it has that bad rap when it comes to Chernobyl and all those other events that you named earlier.
Yeah, it just scares people.
Yeah.
There's this whole stigma wrapped around it, and that's why when you hear about, oh, there's a radioactive event in Rhode Island, and then I keep getting messages from people and comments from people, that's why there's so many weirdos around Rhode Island, or like, this is why there'll never be another, people get all fired up about it, and there's all these conspiracy theories about why it's so terrible. I've been getting inundated with so many messages about this now.
I don't think I'm a weird guy, and I grew up in Charlestown, and yeah, I don't know, maybe something will come up from an effect in 50 years, but I haven't been affected by anything, and I live, I'm not going to say how close, but close to that video that you put on YouTube in that area where it takes place. But another actually something that you posted that I knew about some other topics on your channel, but something I didn't know about was the abandoned plane crash, which I found very interesting.
Yeah, so there in the woods of Rhode Island, there's an abandoned plane crash that went down in the early 1970s that was also completely forgotten about. So what did you want? Did you have like a specific question about that, or you want me to give the quick rundown?
I mean, you don't want to go spoil all your videos. People definitely should go watch them. But if you want to just give a quick synopsis,
I'll give the quick synopsis. Yeah. So in the early 1970s, there was a plane crash that went down in the woods of Rhode Island, and because it landed in the middle of a swamp, the plane itself was never recovered. The two engines were airlifted out of there, but the body of the plane was left as is. And because it's made of aluminum, it didn't rot, it didn't rust, it didn't disintegrate. It's still there, sitting in about 2 feet of water. I got a tip from DEM, I want to say in late 2020, that they were surveying the area and they saw the fuselage in the woods because the leaves were off the trees, and that I should go check it out. But they didn't have any coordinates. It was just like a rough area of where they think it was, So I was like, okay, that sounds pretty interesting. So I looked up some articles. I thought I found the article about the plane, and we had about 2 square miles to work with to find this plane. So of course, anytime I'm like researching for a video, Google Earth is the place to go. So I went on Google Earth. A couple of my friends were looking with me, and it took us about 6 months to locate this plane. So in the summer, when you can search through different seasons. So in the summer months on Google Earth, it would just be tree canopy. You couldn't see anything through the trees. So I was like, all right, if there's a plane crash in there, we can't see it. And then when we switched to winter view, there's snow on the ground, and the plane is white, so it would just blend in with the snow. So then we kept looking for months and months, and I was working on other videos at the same time, and this whole thing this plane crash was in the back of my mind. My friend Alex and I were like, we got to find this thing. Like, we got to just keep looking. I dropped a pin, and I was like, this has got to be the location of the plane crash, because I thought I saw something on Google Earth. And we're like, we'll wait to go out. We'll plan it out. We'll go in the middle of summer, because we want it to look like Lost. Because anytime I shoot a video, I want the season to reflect the vibe of the video. So this is a plane crash. We want it to be all completely overgrown and look like it crash landed in a swamp that's completely overgrown, and we had to like bushwhack to get to it. So then on July 3rd, 2021, after about 6 months of searching, he sends me a text message. I found the plane. I can see the wing. So we get all fired up. We're like, okay, next day we got to go out. So it's the 4th of July, 2021. We pack all our gear up and we hike out into the woods. And this plane is in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Like, you can't even stumble on this thing by accident, and you can't see it until you're about 50 yards away. But we got to it, and everything is exactly the way it was when it crash landed through the trees. The whole front end is ripped off. All the controls are still in there. The pilot seat is still in the plane. And this is a pretty big plane. It was an 8-passenger, twin engine plane that went down. But yeah, highly recommend people go check out the video to see the full story there. But not many people knew that it even existed. So I'm curious. I'm sure there are so many other stories that I don't even know about yet, that I haven't heard about or that I haven't gotten a tip about. But that one was probably, as far as, because it's not an urban legend. It's not worldwide history. It's not anything that anyone knew about. It was completely forgotten about. And then we went and found it.
Right. Yeah. And I think the biggest urban legend you have on your YouTube channel is definitely about vampires.
Oh yeah. Vampires in Rhode Island.
Yes. And that's something which is crazy, and we can get into the details. But I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it really wasn't that long ago people believed in this stuff. We're not that far removed from the late 1800s.
No.
And obviously 150 years for a person is a long time, but in the grand scheme of reality, it's not. So to think just 150 years ago people were doing this, and I'm alluding to it now, but if you want to get into that video, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, this is a pretty popular urban legend, not just in Rhode Island, but throughout the United States, because people love the idea of there's a real life vampire that actually existed. But the story is way sadder than that. It was actually
messed up.
It's totally messed up. So back in the 1800s, tuberculosis was on the rise. It was spreading rapidly. It was wiping out entire families. So even throughout New England, it was wiping out entire families. And they wanted to blame it on something. It was called the wasting disease, because family members would just slowly die. So they believed, back then it was called the New England vampire panic. They believed that undead relatives, or just the undead in general, were rising from their graves at night and then sapping the life force from their victims. And these were the vampires that were going around New England. So it was actually just tuberculosis that was slowly killing all of these people.
Well, people thought that ghosts were sitting on their chests at night.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. There were so many stories. You could read there are articles from the Providence Journal about this called Vampire Panic Sweeps Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so superstitious back then. And especially in these small communities too. It wasn't happening in the bigger cities necessarily. It was always in like small towns where it was a tight, close-knit community, and all of these families were super close. So when an entire family dies, you're like, are we the next ones? Is this going to happen to us? So they were getting very superstitious about it. And they blamed it on, the undead, ghosts, vampires. And what happened was with Mercy Brown, it was a family of, I'm going to get my facts wrong because I like do so much research across videos,
That's
but
okay.
it was a whole family, and they were all dying off. Like the siblings were dying off, and then the father was distraught, and then his daughter Mercy, she passed away from tuberculosis, and the townspeople were said, she's cursed. We need to take her out of, she's the one that's coming and stealing the life force from everyone else. We need to dig her up and then take her heart out and burn it, and then that'll get rid of the curse. And it became like this phenomenon. It was this whole thing. It was just, the story is about basically a distraught father trying to bring peace to his family, and under the influence of the community, he had his daughter exhumed, her heart taken out, and then burned and like turned into a mixture that someone else would then consume to try and cure them of the curse. It was just, it was completely messed up.
Yeah.
And that's Rhode Island.
Yep. And do the math, 23 to 2000, then 100 years, that's 123, then add another 20 years to that, that's 143 years ago, which really isn't, that's a few generations behind. So, that's really not that long ago that that was happening in Rhode Island.
People, you go up to her grave is still there in Exeter, Rhode Island, and you go up to her and people leave like trinkets and all these things. And I'm like, you got to give some flowers to her dad, the one who saw his wife die, almost all of his children die, completely distraught, tried to like save his remaining children from this, what he thought was a curse, or what the townspeople thought was a curse.
Right, and he was pressured into that. He really didn't want to do that, right?
He was completely pressured into it. This poor guy, like, had to bury. I can't even imagine it. So when I was reading the story, people, it's a Halloween story. It's like a spooky ghost story that people, we're going to go to Mercy Brown's grave. We're going to try and like communicate with the ghost of Mercy Brown. But when you read the actual story, it's just completely tragic.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to communicate with her ghost.
No, so when I was making that video, I was like, normally I throw a bunch of jokes in and like all these like a bunch of humor in there. I was like, no. I was reading more about it, putting the script together. I was like, no, I have to treat this one with respect because it's just so sad.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely, I was aware of it, but again, not in the super detail that your videos give. So even though we're going over the synopsises, what's the plural for synopsis? I don't know. The synopsis of most of these videos, you should definitely still go and watch them and enjoy them to get the full experience, because they really are great. Like I said, it combines all this different sort of rich, sense of modern filmmaking and information. So they're really great. What would you say your favorite video so far has been?
Oh, that's a good question. Probably, I want to say The Lost City. So it's abandoned Hampton City in North Smithfield, Rhode Island.
Okay, I remember. I watched that one.
So it's all of these ruins from the 1600s through the 1800s that are scattered throughout the forest. It's not the most exciting abandoned place, but it's one of my favorites just because of how the video was made. So these ruins, it's basically like all these old stone cellars. There's dams in the middle of the woods. There's wells, like very creepy wells throughout. And so it's this big, like pretty decent sized settlement that used to be there. It's called the Lost City, but it was very far from a city. It was just generally an agricultural center and a bunch of farmland with a bunch of houses. But Amy, I can hear it's picking that up.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
That's okay.
She's having a snack.
That's all right.
So it was this agricultural town, and all of the ruins are still there, but its history was dicey. People didn't know who originally lived there. They didn't know what happened to them. There were all of these legends about aliens came down and abducted them, or all of the people were criminals and they just like up and left, or everyone was kidnapped. So we went to go and document all of the ruins that were still there and piece together the whole history. And when I say we, I'm referencing me and my mom. So I've had her come with me on a couple adventures. And this one, I was like, Mom, don't worry about it. We're just going for a hike in the woods. So she met up with me. And the first day we went there, we were hiking around for maybe like 2 or 3 hours trying to find all of these ruins. And they're spread out. They're like anywhere from a quarter mile to a half mile away from each other. And there are no trails to get to these locations. They're just in the middle of the woods. You just have to
And
kind
Rhode
of guess
Island
where
is
they are.
tick infested too.
Yeah, so it was like, and like we're losing daylight, so we're out there running around. I'm trying to get the footage. I got the drone out. I gave my mom a GoPro. I even put her name on it. I was like, this is Mom's GoPro. And we couldn't find all the locations. So then I'm piecing the story together, and I reached out to a local expert. And he was grateful enough. I was grateful enough to get the coordinates from him for other locations where the ruins were. So 2 weeks later, I called my mom. Mom, we got to go back out there, and we gotta document the rest of the spots. Don't worry, it's just a hike in the woods. So we meet up the second time, and it takes us almost 4 hours. We got lost in the woods at one point and separated while we were tracking down all these ruins. The sun's going down. My poor mom is trying to call me, but there was no reception out there, so like we couldn't reach each other. And it sounds weird. It's not like this is the wilderness. This is just northern Rhode Island. So
Right.
People are going to make fun of me for getting lost in the woods of North Smithfield, but it was scary out there for a minute. So this whole thing, and then in the video, like I allude to it a little bit, but I don't really get into detail about like just how chaotic that whole shoot was, where my mom and I are literally running through the woods, finding like stone ruins to capture for this video. So
Yeah.
it ranks up there.
Something else that's eerie, I think, about being in areas like that is you realize like you're alone right now, but not, it was long ago, but there had already been people there. You feel it's such a weird feeling that you're there and it's abandoned and nobody's there. But not too long ago, there were so many people there, and it was a town, and that's an eerie feeling because in the same area where the nuclear facility was at the Francis Carter Preserve, there's foundations like that. I think there's a couple, and then there's like an old stone fireplace too. So there was a whole house and just a fireplace is left, right? And it's so eerie to think that where you're standing, a family once slept, and it's just nothing. Like, to me, for some reason, that's an eerie feeling. Did you get that same feeling when you were out there?
Yeah, most places I visit, you feel that energy where there was something that used to happen here, and now it's just either a ghost town or completely dead silent. I think that's the thing that impacts me the most is how quiet these places are, because you expect to hear noise, you expect to hear either people cheering. In the case of McCoy Stadium, I went to McCoy Stadium growing up all the time. That's where the Pawtucket Red Sox played. It was the AAA affiliate of the Boston Red Sox. This place was awesome. You could go there and eat your ice cream out of a little Paw Sox baseball cap. And I visited there. It was abandoned in 2020. So abandoned for about 3 years when I visited. And, to see the stands, even though it was like somewhat in the off season, so when it would normally be quiet, but to know that now this place is just decaying in the middle of the city. It's never going to open again. The stands are never going to be filled. There's never going to be another pitch thrown at this place. That's when it hits me pretty hard, and that's when I feel this obligation to do it justice and tell the full story and show why this place was so special. And I think that's what's different about my videos is that a lot of these places aren't just like random abandoned places that I stumbled on and I just want to go check out. I have a connection with a lot of them because I grew up next to them. I visited them when they were in operation. I knew people who were involved in them. So there's a lot more to it. And
Right.
That's why it hits me even harder.
That is absolutely true, because I can definitely relate to that as well. Like, to have that extra level of connection, you're absolutely right, is huge.
Yeah, and if you're a Rhode Islander, definitely like you'll watch these videos, and I'm like, we could have a whole conversation about just one of these places. But I try to make it scalable so that if you're not from Rhode Island, it's not like you have to get all of the jokes I'm making about Rhode Island to understand the video. I just throw that in there for my Rhode Islanders out there.
Easter eggs.
Yeah, I got to throw those Easter eggs in there.
Right. Yeah. And it's crazy because I had been to McCoy Stadium. I don't know. I won't say that I've been there, a bunch, but I definitely went there a couple times when I was a kid. And then I was lucky enough to go on the field and play on the field for a state championship. Not going to say that I was contributed anything to the winning of that state championship. And if anybody's listening who was on that team, I just got to say it, not act like I was a big part of that. But it was crazy because even then, like, that was in 2018. you could tell like they just didn't care about it anymore. Like the dugout had a bathroom in it and the door didn't close all the way, and the bullpens were made out of like there was splintering wood, and the seat foam was just all disgusting and decaying. And the field was beautiful. The baseball field is beautiful, but then everything around it, was definitely falling apart. And I think, unfortunately, it really tells a story of what's going on in Rhode Island right now. Is we have all this rich culture, and as a state, we just let it go away. Like McCoy Stadium is amazing. It's been here since like the 1970s, right? If I remember correctly, like the actual location. And we just let it go to Worcester, like not a big deal. Like the attractions are slowly leaving the state. And what was the name of that amusement park that was I think it was in Warwick, wasn't it? Or
Rocky
what I'm talking
Point.
about? Rocky Point. Have you done a video on Rocky Point?
No, I get the most requests for Rocky Point. That's probably like the top one, is either people ask me to do Rocky Point or the Ladd Center, which was in Exeter, I believe.
Okay. Oh, and Enchanted Forest, which actually isn't too far from where I am now. I'm not sure if you've heard of that.
I visited that a couple times.
Okay.
Yeah, the Enchanted Forest was like a children's amusement park in the woods. And
Yeah.
back when I was first getting into urban exploration, this was in 2012. This was like before social media really blew up these spots. So like if you found one, chances are it wasn't touched by people. It wasn't vandalized. They're all pretty much stuck in time. And then now once like YouTube blew up, it's like impossible to find places. But back then I heard about the Enchanted Forest, so I went to check it out, and everything was still there. So there was a giant pirate ship in the woods. There was like, it was all like fairy tale themed, right? So it had like the old woman shoe. It was like a giant like 20-foot yellow shoe that was in the woods, and all of these things. That was a wild one to see because it was all completely overgrown. Now it's since been demolished. I think most of it is gone now. There's a sign out front that has like a huge Humpty Dumpty on it that just
the sign's still there.
I think the sign's still there.
I've driven past it quite a few times, and that would always like really interest me about what was going on back there. And I'm gonna give a shout out to my friend from high school who actually, I think he did a video on it. He doesn't really do YouTube anymore, but look up Drew Anderson on YouTube, and he has a video. I think he did a video on Rocky Point and the Enchanted Forest. He does some like drone footage, and I don't think he talks in the videos, but it's cool just to see the area, because Rocky Point is a park now, right? And you can go there and walk and hike and whatnot. But I mean, back to like what I was talking about, the Rhode Island it's really sad because now you're seeing it with the tallest building in the state, the Superman building, and you actually did a video on that recently too, right?
I did one on the Superman building a few years ago, and I referenced it in like one of my most recent videos, but that's just stuck in development limbo right now. Tallest building in the state sits abandoned to this day. Right.
And there was talk about, were they going to make the real estate into a soccer stadium, or were they going to do that with McCoy Stadium? I'm not exactly sure.
So the Superman building was going to be repurposed into living spaces.
Okay.
But to convert all of those office spaces, it's like an absolute nightmare. McCoy Stadium was supposed to be turned into new high schools for Pawtucket, which would be amazing. Like I am all for converting that land to new high schools. That's like a great outcome for it.
Absolutely.
But recently a billionaire stepped in. He's just having fun with his money, and he says, you know what, I want to buy McCoy Stadium and I want to save it. So now the high school project is put on hold while the city has talks with this billionaire investor who just showed up with all of his money. And then there's Tidewater Landing. There's like a soccer stadium that's being built in Pawtucket now. It's just all these weird development projects that are happening all over the place, and nothing is like getting finished.
Two things that Rhode Island needs is, school system updates and housing. You know what I mean? So two things that opportunity arose, and unfortunately it was stopped. But, that's something I think is really important to talk about. Not a lot of people talk about that and this relates all the way back, because when you were talking about in the beginning of the podcast, how you got into editing at Woonsocket Middle School, in the middle school with iMovie and learning the basics of editing, I can relate to that too, because I went to a great high school and middle school, and we had a career and technical program at our high school, and that's where I got introduced to engineering and 3D printing, and that's my current career today, you know? So we have all these great school districts, all these great opportunities that are provided to us as a state. And I think it's extremely important to talk about and expose that there's all these different opportunities for us to improve as a community and as a state. And I think it's extremely important that, we support that, and do what we can. And another thing I like to touch on is, like, people worry about all this stuff going on at a countrywide level, and people don't realize how important it is to get out and educate yourself about your community and understand what's going on, because that's what's going to affect your day to day. Right. And that's sort of like when during the last election, was it midterms? I think it was midterms. I had on a lot of state senators and a lot of people running for local government positions, because a lot of people, I know we're going off on a huge tangent here, but this is important because
we're getting totally charged now.
Well, I'm not going to get into specifics about what I personally believe in, but I just want people to understand that, like, it's so important, because sure, I'm from Rhode Island. I plan on moving out of the state eventually, but it's still where I'm from. I still care about it, and I just think it's extremely important. If there's one of the many messages you get out of this podcast is understand your community, go and understand who's running for local office, because that's what's going to make the biggest difference. You know what I mean? And that's a huge message I was trying to push during the last election cycle. I wasn't going to talk about the big issues going on facing the countrywide stuff. Like, that's not what concerns, sure, it concerns me, but what is more important to me is understanding what's going on in your surroundings and what's going to really affect your day to day. Right. And I think what you're doing as well is amazing, because you're reminding people of the rich history of this state. We're one of the 13 original colonies, right? Sure, we're the smallest state, and at one point we had the longest name. We don't have the longest name anymore. Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Now we're just Rhode Island. Yeah, I mean, what you're doing is extremely important as well. Reminding people of the rich history that the state has. We're not just a stop between Connecticut and Massachusetts, or, we have a history. We're important, and we have a lot to offer. And I think like I said, again, what you're doing is extremely important too. You have to come at it from all these different aspects. So yeah, sorry to get off on that tangent, but I just think that was something I wanted to touch on while I had you on, because yeah, it goes into the Woonsocket Middle School was a perfect opportunity arose, and somebody took advantage of it, because Rhode Island needs housing desperately. You know what I mean? People are moving to the state, and we don't have, and house prices are crazy. So nobody can afford to live in a house. So they're making the middle school into apartments, right? Affordable. I don't know how affordable they're going to be, but they're definitely going to be more affordable than buying a house right now in the state, so their opportunity arose, and they took, even though it was on the private side, somebody bought it.
Right.
Somebody sees the opportunity, you know what I mean? So I think as a community, more people need to realize that too, so hopefully this investor at McCoy Stadium realizes, hey, well, maybe we can work out some sort of deal, and I can help the community and make money on the backside of it. You know what I mean? So hopefully there's a win-win situation there. You just got to hope for the best, I guess. But
I totally agree with you. I mean, you can make the biggest change on the local level, and especially bringing awareness to places like this is the biggest piece of that, because if it becomes a social cause, or if it becomes something you're passionate about, then that translates into the change that these politicians can enact. And at least, going back to McCoy Stadium, I'm hoping that it has a positive outcome with this investor. I mean, I think the best course of action would be for him to come in and just use his billions of dollars instead of on a vanity project to just fund the construction of the new high school there. I think that's the
Right.
easiest.
I mean,
It's
I mean
what's
that
desperately needed in Pawtucket, you
Yeah.
know. So for him to come in and just halt progress and be like, wait, no, I have an idea and I have a lot
Right.
of money. I just build the school.
Right. And the unfortunate thing about that is that's probably not going to happen, you know, and it's definitely something that I certainly wish somebody would do that too, but I just personally don't see that happening, you know. So you almost think if there's a way that they could subdivide the land. And so does he currently own the property? Did he buy the property?
No, he didn't buy the property. The city of Pawtucket owns the property now. They took on the
Okay.
costs of
And
maintenance and everything.
okay, and then what did he say? Did he say, "Hey, I'm interested in buying the property"?
Yeah, that's where it's at
Okay.
now.
And is it I haven't done the research. I mean, I'm a realtor and I haven't done the research on this, but like so is it on the market? Is it for sale technically?
It's not for sale. That's why
Okay.
it's like kind of strange. The city owns it. They had proposed plans for a new high school to be built on the site. They were going to demolish the stadium. And then this investor came in and he said, wait, pause. I have other ideas of how we could repurpose this land, because he saw, I mean, when my video released and everything, you know, there's a lot of public outrage in Rhode Island about McCoy Stadium. People are really upset to see it close and to see the new owners of the Paw Sox move, you know, up and move from Pawtucket up to Worcester. It was pretty frustrating at the time.
Yeah.
Because the new owners were adamant, we're leaving Pawtucket. We don't want anything to do with the stadium. We want a new stadium. So
Well, since
the
they bought it,
costs-
right? Since they bought it,
What
they
do you
wanted
mean?
to move.
Oh
Since
yeah,
they
since
bought
they
it,
bought it,
wanted
yeah, out the gate, they were like, no, we're gonna move, and it was, I think, like $77 million to renovate McCoy Stadium to get it like up to spec, get it all nice. But then they opted to spend $150 million to build a new stadium 40 miles north.
Polar
So, like,
Park. Yeah.
Polar Park.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been to Polar Park. It is very nice, but
It is, yeah.
Pawtucket, it was such a great thing for the city, right, from a community standpoint. But going back from that investor's standpoint, the billionaire, it seems like it's the town's fault. Because why didn't they just say, hey, sorry, no. So it's not really the billionaire's fault. It's the town's fault for not saying, hey, no, sorry, we have a plan. It's, you know, really not for sale. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, sure, you could put some blame on the billionaire, but also on the town, where you could say, hey, guys, why aren't we just doing this? You know what I mean? So you think, all right, what are they going to put as a priority over investing in schools? Because that's another thing you hear on the news a lot, especially in northern Rhode Island, is, you know, we really need to reinvest into the school system,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the more urban areas of the state. So, yeah, I mean, sorry to get off onto this sort of statement about Rhode Island, but like I said, circling back, you know, I care about this state. You know, it's not a lost cause, you know, which is what a lot of people think. You know, there's definitely potential here to help bring it back and make it to what it once was, really. Because I mean, I have my mom's side of the family is all from Rhode Island. My dad's side isn't, but they're all from, you know, West Warwick, Providence. They're Italian, so, you know, they have all this rich history. And I hear about how great the state was and how awesome everything was. And the Warwick Musical Theater, that's something else that might, I mean, I don't know what's there now, but that's something else that I think would be a cool informational video about. But it's not abandoned. It was just a tent, really, wasn't it? The Warwick Musical Theater.
I think so.
Yeah. So that's something that might be a cool sort of information video. But yeah, so a lot of great content you're coming out with on your channel here. And I think as we start to wrap up here, I think we need to say some more you need to say some more controversial things. What would you say the best thing about Rhode Island is?
Oh, we got the best food. Rhode Island has the best food. It beats Boston, especially on the Italian side. You know, Federal Hill is the greatest. It embarrasses every other place. I want to give a shout out to Wright's Dairy. They have the best eclairs.
Yep.
My wife and I have been, lucky enough
Wright's
to go
Dairy
to
Farm.
Paris, and their pastries are garbage compared to what we have here in Rhode Island. So hot take
That is
number one.
something I've said is if I ever move out of this state, like the food's just gonna suck because it's not like it is. Like I love New Hampshire and I love Maine, and the food's just not the same. Like they got lobster rolls and that's it. Sure, we have seafood here, but we also have the rich mixing pot of cultures and all these great foods, ranging from Italian to more Central America themed foods, and we have a lot of great cultures here in the state, which is a definite high point, I think. All right. And I got to ask a question. What's your least favorite thing about the state?
Oh man, I mean, I could give like a super easy answer and just say the roads because I'm sitting in traffic every single day. That's like my least favorite thing right now is like,
Yep.
why is every highway under construction all of the time?
It's not just every highway, it's every road in the state.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. I live near Route 2, 138 in Rhode Island, obviously, and they're both under construction. They're putting a rotary in, they're repaving. And I recently went up to northern Maine, and I swear they're just doing construction all over New England. I just think they just started to say, all right, we're going to do it all at once.
Yeah. That's how I'm like, am I getting old or the roads just like really suck around here? Because I'm just like complaining about the traffic. But the other day we were like on 195 and we were sitting in, it was like bumper to bumper for like 10 miles.
Well, it's always
and I found out it's because they closed like one lane for fun on Thurber's Ave in Providence. I was like, they were like, what happens if we close a lane today? I'm like, I don't know, let's find out. And then they put some cones out and then just like laugh. So
right.
That's how I imagine it going down.
Yeah, it's like I was in it was just south of Augusta, Maine. So not a super populated area. And we're driving back on the middle of the day during the week. So people are working. It's not a weekend. And we're in this traffic that adds like an hour. I'm like, why? And then we get to Providence, and Massachusetts is by far the worst in terms of driving through.
Mm-hmm.
It's far worse because once you get past Providence and the 295 intersection, right, where 195 and 295 or Route 4 and 195 come together, the traffic gets a lot less. But I would tend to agree with that statement of the traffic and the roads being the worst part of the state.
That was an easy one for me to go to.
It is. You could say the taxes and I guess you could say the taxes. You could say the cost of housing, like what I touched on earlier, is something that seriously needs to be, invested in the state. But it's a great state. A lot of beaches, a lot of great beaches. And I'm not going to give a shout out to the beach that I haven't gone to in a while, but the beach that I would go to, and it's not nearly as busy as the other beaches. So I might have to tell you that off air when we're not recording.
Okay.
So
yeah.
But because if you go to a lot of our beaches, it's absolutely insane. And but what about favorite restaurant in Rhode Island? What would you say your go-to restaurant is?
Oh my goodness. What a question. Antonio's Pizza, I'd say, is in the top. My wife and I became regulars there. We would go in there and they would just like give us the same order every time we walked in.
Nice.
You get the mac and cheese pizza, highly recommend, and the salad pizza. Give a shout out to them. Antonio's Pizza by the Slice in Providence.
Okay.
I think I've mentioned them more than any other place in my videos. Like I constantly talk about Antonio's Pizza.
Okay.
At one point I did a video on the Big Blue Bug in Rhode Island, which is like one of the biggest billboards in the state. And it's literally a giant blue bug. Mm-hmm. And I asked Big Blue Bug, I said, basically this whole video is just a commercial for your business. I will accept payment in the form of Antonio's Pizza. And then the owner of Big Blue Bug reached out to me and he's like, where do you want your pizza delivered? From Antonio's. So maybe he recognized it, but yeah, Antonio's Pizza.
Yeah.
I'll give it a shout out. But I want to give a special mention to Cafe Zoe in Providence. They have like this drink that I'm hooked on right now. I posted about it on my Instagram.
Mhm.
It's called the Buddy, which is a reference to Buddy Cianci.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't know if this was like his favorite drink or something like that. But you go on like a nice early morning, and it's iced coffee milk with a shot of espresso, and it is delicious. It's like the most. It feels like the most Rhode Island drink ever. But
I might have to
highly,
try that.
highly recommend. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Okay. And I got to give a shout out since I'm from
I
Southern
got it.
Rhode
Yeah.
Island.
What do you
I
got?
think I got to give a shout out to a local business owner, colleague of mine, Phil's in downtown Wakefield.
Oh, huge fan. Yeah, that place
Yes.
is awesome.
So he used to do dinner, but he doesn't do dinner anymore. Now it's breakfast and lunch, and they're open till like 3:00, 6 to 3, I think, every day. Highly recommend the crab cakes Benedict.
Mhm.
Amazing. Also in Westerly. Not a lot of people know about Westerly, Rhode Island. Westerly, the cooked goose, which is really good. That's near the Watch Hill Yacht Club, I believe, over there. And they have some really great breakfast. It is a little bit more expensive, but it's worth it. You know, I think they have like a salmon. I love eggs Benedict. That's like my go-to, dish. Or sometimes it's an omelet, depending on whatever. But yeah, so Phil's and the cooked goose, I think, in Southern Rhode Island are really great places to go and try. There's a few new places, but we'll see how they last. Yeah, so it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and talking about this great state of Rhode Island that we live in.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been an absolutely incredible episode. I've learned a lot, and I hope you guys have as well. And I'm definitely going to go binge watch some more of Jason's videos here on YouTube. And I will definitely add it to the description of this podcast. And you should be able to click on the links, whether you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatnot, to his YouTube channel. And Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah. Thank you again, Max. This was fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and also for you guys that don't know, I have a Patreon, a Knowledge is Power Patreon, and I do have some exclusive content in the works currently, looking to create some really, really great content that's going to be monthly. I'm looking to release 4 episodes exclusively on Patreon a month, in addition to this main show that will be available on widely available platforms. I'm looking to do one about real estate, one about history, which I think you would be interested in. And I'm not exactly sure about the other 2, but I might maybe make one of these episodes exclusive on Patreon as well. But if you just want to support the podcast and support the mission that Knowledge is Power is about, make sure to go subscribe for as little as $3 a month on Patreon and support the podcast. And make sure to subscribe to Jason again. And check out Antonio's Pizza.
There we go.
Yep.
That's the big takeaway.
So, yeah, thanks again, Jason. And thank you all for listening. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook as well. Jason, are you on all those social media platforms as well?
You can check me out on YouTube, youtube.com/Jason Allard, and Instagram, it's Jason_Allard. And those are the big ones you can find me on.
Great. Yeah. So thank you all for listening. Thanks for checking out the Knowledge is Power podcast, and I will catch you in the next one.